Good.
Firstly, Dave,
Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Ashley. Beaut.
Now, as one of the Victoria's first elected Greens candidates, what made you decide to go from local politics and a bit of a break to running for federal parliament?
Well, I've actually been interested in local politics. I was involved in international politics, vice president of one of the biggest climate change organisations in the world at a local government level. So anywhere you can help other people do good things, it's worth doing. I think there are lots of different places you can do good things. Why have I moved? Well, I think local politics is great. I think federal politics is great. I think international politics is great. Wherever you can do good, just do it.
Okay. The ALP currently hold the seat following the by-election by 0.6%. Do you think you've got a chance of being able to swing that more towards the Greens again, following after the debacle with the last Labor candidate and the switch to Jed Kearney?
I think that's up to the voters. I think that's what elections are
forward.
about.
Yep.
You know, people decide what they want. They've got a wide range of choices. What I really want people to do is vote for what they believe in. Vote for what they want. That's what elections are for. Some people died for that right. Sometimes you hear things like the two parties. You know, it isn't just two parties. The Greens have a really important voice in the Parliament, as do other people. I think we can. But it's up to the electors, it's up to people like you.
Yeah. Well, actually, this isn't on the running sheet, but this one I will throw in.
Sure.
Do you think many politicians today understand, like when I was growing up, but I'm 40 years of age now, my grandfather served in World War II. He was, no matter what, he voted for Robert Menzies. No matter what, my dad voted for Menzies. Then he voted for Hewson and Howard. It doesn't work like that anymore for people of even my generation who are in their 40s now. You know, I came of age in 96 and I voted for John Howard the first time, but not the second. The days of people like post-World War II of voting along their family's party lines are long gone. And I think that also reflects in the fact that you've got parties like One Nation and Clive Palmer's United Australia Party picking up votes that they just simply wouldn't have picked up in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, that's part of it. We call it volatility. What used to be people, as you said, people used to always vote Labor or Liberal or Australia Party or whatever. Now people change their mind much more quickly. That's what makes things uncertain. You can't call things places what they call safe seats. And that's not so bad. I mean, people have the right. The people are getting brighter. People are getting better educated. They're understanding more. They're making choices. I want them to be progressive. I want them to do good things for everyone. Some other parties are more interested in individuals, and some other parties want to make us frightened of other people. The Greens want you to be good to other people, plants and animals. We think we can cooperate. We think that there's a lot of people who are uncertain about where they'll vote. Climate change is something I have been interested in for years. I did my science honours in climate change. It frightened me 20 years ago, and I've been talking about it for 20 years. I haven't seen the major parties do enough about it. I know they now think it's electorally important, and so they're saying, oh, well, we might believe in it, or even if we don't believe in it, we'll look like we do. But climate change is something that people really need to vote Green for, and I think we're going to see a big shift in votes as a consequence of that.
Yeah, well, again, just as we're having this conversation out, for example, you know, with the current government, when they decided to close down Holden and Ford by ending the subsidies where most other countries to some extent subsidise their motor vehicle industries, perhaps rather than just shutting them down, and then of course all the ancillary businesses, say on Sydney Road in Campbellfield, that all closed, that used to supply Ford, for example, with all their parts. Yeah. Perhaps they should have, I don't know, said, well, you can keep some of your subsidies if you switch to producing electric vehicles, and we'll...
Well, that's right.
And those plants could have stayed open, perhaps.
That's right.
Those businesses that supply those plants could have stayed open and just switched, rather than shutting down, could have switched from producing parts for internal combustion engine vehicles to electric.
Well, in fact, 15 years ago or so, I spoke to the international head of Toyota worldwide. I spoke to Toyota in Australia. I spoke to other companies. I said, let's get hybrid cars, petrol electric cars, built in Australia. Really, those companies said to me, Australians don't make their choices based on fuel efficiency. And unfortunately, we have been lagging like that. We have no current standards for those sorts of things, which around the world, other places are now miles ahead of us. You're right, we can be smart. There's I think it was a Toyota factory that's going to be making photovoltaics or solar electric cars. They're really smart things. Places like Norway are doing those sorts of things, the Scandinavian countries, Japan. There are lots of places where they've realised this a long time ago. We could be doing it too. Instead, because we've got climate change deniers, we haven't grabbed the opportunities that an intelligent, well-equipped workforce like you had at Toyota, Holden, Ford, who could do that sort of thing. They just lost their jobs because people covered up their ears when they heard that we need to change. What a pity that is.
Yeah, now this electorate of
Cooper, yeah.
Now Cooper,
that's
was
right.
Batman.
That's right.
What do you think of the demographics have changed over, say, the last 20 years of the district?
Well, I remember walking down Separation Street, for some people who may know Northcote, with my grandmother who lived there. I think she lived there 70 years ago or something. It's got richer. It's got more sophisticated, still full of lots of people, very multicultural, very interesting, diverse. There are lots of professionals that have moved in, and there are lots of old-timers as well. It's a really nice eclectic mix of people. I still really like it. And I like the fact you can walk down the street and people still talk to you. So I think it's a great place, Cooper. I wouldn't want to change it that much. Love the trees, love the people. Let's keep it good.
Where within the electorate do you think, or do you think more just broadly over the whole electorate, do you think the Greens will more likely pick up more votes at the southern end or at the northern end of the electorate?
That's hard to know where we'll pick up votes. We did early on. I lived in Westgarth in southern Northcote since about 1999, and that was some of the greenest booths in Australia, some of the greenest areas in Australia then.
Yep.
And it's been moving north. It's become a bit more patched. There are some really green areas in the north. With that thing called volatility that I mentioned before, same thing. It's really hard to work out where the votes have come from. I'll just say, you decide as a voter what you want to vote for and who you want to be, and anything is possible anywhere.
I could almost skip a lot of these questions because you've almost answered plenty of them. For preferences, what do you intend or hope for your preferences depending on the outcome of the election to go to? More likely to the Labor Party? What parties will you hope to put last on your ballot paper?
The Greens have always had a principle of preferencing like-minded people and or parties. They're not fixed as to who's standing, so we don't know who they are, but that's always been the guiding principle. We don't run like some of the major parties. We tend to try and keep that principle of saying, if you will advance green policies, and we'd like to hear theirs too, then they're the types of groups that we'd like to advance. We also know there's a really important role for Greens, like Adam Banks played for a long time. By being present, what you do is you influence what the other major parties say. I don't really believe, I know, let me not be too unfair, but the environment really for the major parties is an electoral issue. I've been an environmentalist for decades and I've seen so many opportunities lost. I see those major parties as saying, if we can win the election, we'll back the environment, but they don't have that really genuine commitment that the Greens has. So preferencing like-minded parties is a really important way of getting that green message across, and also electing people like Adam, like me, like others around Victoria and Australia is another way. In a parliament where the Greens aren't going to be government, we're going to be the honest people who stand up for an independent commission against corruption, well before the Labor does. Labor wouldn't back that for years. Climate change stuff. Why did it happen? Because the Greens got Labor to do it. There are lots of policies. An increase in New Start by $75 a week. It has to be straight away. It can be immediate. There are lots of policies. Just by having a voice, you influence what the other parties think is acceptable, and that's a really important role.
Again, you just answered the next question that I was getting to about New Start, except seeing you mentioned it. I wanted you to know this one, and this was brought to me by several constituents and others that I've asked. In Victoria, for example, and as a practicing lawyer, you're probably aware of this already, that say somebody is sentenced for a criminal offence, or something not too bad, maybe they pinched a bit of shopping or something for their kids or something and got busted convicted of shoplifting.
Yes.
They're then sent to do 120 of hours community work or whatever at the X place, Y place.
Yes, I understand that issue.
Then the work for the dole scheme sends the same people who are unemployed to the exact same place to improve their employment prospects. Now, and just as a reporter who's not supposed to have an opinion, I can't personally, and I've definitely checked this several times over, I can't see how it can be one on your left hand punishment for committing a crime and being found guilty, and then you return the following week for work for the dole and it's going to improve your employment prospects. It seems to me that it's a bit more about some businesses and exploiting labour without having to actually employ the people and pay them proper wages. And again, all these people raise that they basically cycled through them almost on the second last day of the 90 days, 3 months trial expiring. Day 89, their services are no longer needed, they don't get a job, and they bring the next one along.
Yeah. Well, you raise a number of really good issues. Underlying all of that to me is inequality. How do you treat people decently and fairly? We are we're blaming people for being unemployed. Some people choose to be unemployed, some people are unwell, some people find it difficult to get work. But there's a big shift in inequality. We're now as unequal in Australia as roughly we were in about 1900. And that's not a good thing. We can do much better than that. Someone who can't get work, who's then forced to mix with people who know the tricks of the trade in crime, is not going to help that person's job prospects. An employer who just cycles workers at low cost and through a subsidy. I know subsidies are important for some employers to have people working for them, but treating people decently isn't that hard. Making Australians more productive is better for them and better for us, and that's what we want to do.
So you think perhaps there should be some conditions put on it, so employers perhaps should be monitored, so it's seen that they're not just cycling through unemployed person every 3 months after unemployed person every 3 months, or have to explain and provide more detail as to why, rather than just cycling through one after the other.
Well, it starts at the level of treating people decently, to be honest. There are lots of rules you could make, but really, if you could make the principle, how would I like to be treated if I was unemployed? And it turns it around. You'd like to work. People like to work. They like to be valued. They like to have enough money that they don't have to scrimp. So we don't want to turn employers into the all evil people, and we don't want to turn unemployed people into the people we need to blame. What we can do is work together to say being gainfully employed is good for everyone. You're right. There are lots of people I know. I've got lots of friends, and myself, I've been in about 20 non-government organisations, maybe more. Lots of people give so much time and energy for no money. They already do that good work. We shouldn't be forcing people who are unlucky to have to mix with people who have been convicted of a crime, because we don't want more people criminalised. We also don't want to frighten people. We're running, you'll find, and you'll see this, I'm not sure when this will go to air, but I ask people to keep an eye out for elections often ask people to be frightened of something, frightened of immigrants, frightened of other people, frightened of poor people.
Children overboard scandal, for example, rather than positive things.
So let's not fall for it. let's think, how can we all do better out of these things? Decent jobs, decent wages, decent unemployment benefits, decent Oz study. They're the sort of things which the Scandinavian countries have learnt to make for more fairer societies, more equal societies. And the really fascinating thing, for those of you who look into it, more equal societies, fairer societies, actually do better on lots of measures. Health, education, happiness, safety. The list is almost endless. That's what Australia was and can be.
Okay, now, the Greens wish to legalise marijuana and have some other drug policies. Would you like to explain those?
Sure. This is partly along the frightening people line. We've spent huge amounts of money as a country criminalising people who use drugs. I've worked in mental health areas for about 20 years, and I can say drugs can really harm people, and some drug can do a great deal of damage. I'm not someone that encourages people to use drugs, but I think removing it as removing the recreational use of marijuana and putting the money that we waste on policing and imprisoning people can be put in other areas of training people, encouraging people, providing money for free undergraduate university and TAFE courses. All of that money can go to fund things which gives meaning to people in other ways. We should have community pill testing. Drugs are made often in backyards. Sometimes they might come from another country. We really don't know what we're taking. When you go to the chemist, you've got a fair idea. When you buy it off the street or somewhere else, you really don't know. And I know of people who have died out of that. I know of people who have never recovered out of doing that. And so let's avoid all that pain and misery and cost. I really want to be sensible about this because I think smoking and the way that we didn't deal with smoking for a long time is a real problem. I've used dope in the long distant past, but really I don't want to smoke. I don't want to ruin my lungs. I don't think marijuana's great, but it's a health issue.
Do you think
it's not a criminal issue.
Now that you say it, do you think also, like we've done with tobacco smoking, that even though there's a few kids still taking it a bit higher, I mean it's dropped since I was in high school when you could smoke at 16, it's dropped over 50%. Do you think by doing that and taking away, what's the word for it, I'm looking for, the coolness factor, which because part of it being illegal and all that makes it cool, if you take that away then the kids aren't interested because it's not really cool anymore. They'll go on to something else.
It's part of the factor. I think people will always want to use drugs, to be honest, and there'll be new drugs that we don't know about today that'll be created in the future. People want to rebel. They want to, alcohol's a drug that's really commonly used.
Yes.
And it actually is the drug that causes the most damage. But that's legal at the moment.
It's legal, yes.
So I might sound a little bit cautious, but I'm not. It's really having been involved for a long time. I don't think drugs are fantastic, but let's make them a health issue, not a criminal issue.
On that side, you've seen both sides. You said you've done some work in mental health and also working as a lawyer. You would have seen both the downsides, no doubt, and some of the positive things that can come from things being managed much better.
I certainly have seen, particularly young people people's brains are really still developing up until about 25, really heavy drug use. If they've got a pre-existing vulnerability to mental illness of any form, those drugs can really make things a bit more difficult for them, and sometimes it's heartbreaking. Cause and effect's hard to establish, so I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying smoking a joint causes this, but there's good evidence to say using drugs that you don't know their content, i.e. you pill test things before you're using, increased THC contents in dope, they create risks, young people, I took risks all the time when I was a young person, I still do. It's going to happen, but let's be smart about it and not just frighten people by turning them into criminals, blaming that person and saying I'm perfect, when none of us are perfect.
All right, the last few questions for you, Dave. What are any other policies or issues you wish to put on the table, such as health, tax, economy, infrastructure, anything like that?
We would like to keep Medicare really strong, one of the ways we'd like to do that is by having a system called Denticare, where you have coverage for dental care under Medicare. Dental health really affects people's physical health, but for some old reason, hundreds or thousands of years ago, teeth are treated differently than the rest of our body. We should stop that madness, fix that up. Better on transport, really public transport, cycling and pedestrian access really is the key. Many of us need to use cars. We're realistic. I've driven trucks as a job. I get that. And I've ridden motorcycles to try to reduce my use of fuel. We're not saying those things aren't needed, but what you've found is federal governments, like with the East-West Link and North-East Link, the building of that is going to stop the Doncaster Rail ever being built, because it's going to take the lanes that would have been allocated for a train line. When you make those sort of decisions, they affect things for 50 years. We really need to emphasise public transport. We really need to work out how a large population can live together. The roads are getting busier and busier. People are getting more upset. Travel times are taking too long. Poor people are forced out into the outer suburbs because housing affordability is terrible. We'd like to increase the support that people in rental properties get. We'd like to move to more of a European system where rent is more secure. We have really short term, and I think I've lived in about 50 houses in my lifetime. Sometime when I didn't have much money, I moved 30 times in 5 years. It's not good living in insecure housing. By making renting a better proposition both for landlords and for renters, the trust we can build up is for a better society that trusts each other and doesn't treat each other as something to earn money from.
So do you agree that the North East Link should go ahead, or?
No, I don't think it should. I think we shouldn't be putting so much money into more and more cars. There's a thing, I was at one stage the chair of the Metropolitan Transport Forum, the metropolitan-wide local government organisation. There's a good thing called elasticity. You build more of a road, it works for about 5 to 10 years, it's getting shorter, but more and more cars get onto it. And when you do things like set up contracts, which happened for the Westgate Freeway, when you build alternatives to those freeways, you actually have to compensate the big companies that build those freeways, so you cut out public transport. That link will cut out other options. Money spent on that will stop being spent where it needs to be.
On things like the Doncaster Link, as you mentioned.
Yeah, the Doncaster rail line. There should be a rail line down the middle of the Eastern Freeway. I think it was planned from about the 1980s, and I think we're a few years past that.
Under my understanding, I think it was originally planned under the Hamer.
I think that you could be right. It's certainly that era.
Notes, but I'm certain it was around then.
It's around that time. You're probably right about that.
Dave, is there anything else you wish to add to our?
Think about voting Green. Think about what you think is worth doing. People are fantastic. We can lift everyone up. It's a big turning point in Australia. Some of us want to be frightened, make others frightened of others. Some of us think cooperating is a better idea. The Greens want to cooperate, and I'd ask you to vote Green wherever you are. You don't have to be in Cooper. Janet Rice is our senator who's going to be re-elected. It's your choice though. That's what's important. It's up to you.
David, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
for your
Ashley. Beaut. Good on you. Thanks for such thoughtful questions.